The Frontline podcast is brought to you by Legion Technologies. Hourly employees want and need flexibility and predictability. They desire more connection and belonging with their peers and companies. And businesses want to maximize productivity while enhancing employee engagement to reduce turnover. Who said we can't have it all? The Frontline podcast is focused on discussing the challenges that come along with having an hourly workforce and shedding light on these important employees who are so often overlooked. You'll hear from leaders bringing transformational and innovative change to their organizations and ways you can improve your own experience and the experiences of your employees, no matter where you sit in your organization. At Legion, we believe that AI-powered workforce management solves these challenges. I'm your host, Tracy Chernoff, Director of Employee Engagement at Legion Technologies, and the host of the podcast, Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources. Be sure to subscribe to the Frontline podcast so you're the first to hear our bi-weekly episodes, which will come out every other Thursday. Learn more at legion.co, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, and get ready to be part of the solution. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Frontline podcast. I am Tracy Chernoff, your host. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast. As a reminder, we are in our first season and we release episodes every other Thursday. So we are a bi-weekly production over here, and we're so glad that you're able to join us every other week. This week's guest is the CEO of Legion Technologies, Sanish Mondkar. And I have to say, I've known Sanish now for a few years because if you've listened to this podcast since the beginning, you know that I actually found Legion Technologies because I was a customer of Legion back in the day. So, organically, we wanted to really bring to light a survey that we recently commissioned and that was published just a month ago and on June 14th. And so this survey is really focused on the state of the hourly workforce as of 2022. And I think that the results of the survey are really, really compelling. And so who better to talk about these results than Sanish? So let me tell you a little bit about Sanish before we jump into the episode. Sanish is the founder and CEO of Legion Technologies. He has more than 20 years of strategic experience in products, technology, and cloud ops. He was Chief Product Officer at SAP and Ariba. In his role at SAP, he was responsible for all procurement and business network products and technology, which represented over $1 billion of annual revenue. Sanish holds a Bachelor's of Computer Engineering from Pune University and a Master's of Computer Science from Cornell University. So again, these survey results are really compelling, and I think you're going to love this discussion that I have with Sanish. And if you'd like to read the survey, I have linked it in the show notes so that you can gain more insight and information. Plus, in the show notes, you can learn more about how you can connect with Sanish. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Sanish. Sanish, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad we finally got you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
I'm sure this is going to be fun.
I think so. I certainly hope so. If we're not having fun, what are we doing after all, right?
Exactly.
So I like to start out every episode with a couple of questions to help any listeners get to know you a little bit better. And I think it's a really nice way to start. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're currently located, and what you do?
Sounds good. My name is Sanish Mondkar. I'm the founder and CEO of Legion, and I live in San Francisco. I've been in the San Francisco Bay Area for close to about 20 years. And I've been working on Legion for 6 years. Out of those 20 years prior to Legion, I was with SAP as Chief Product Officer, working on enterprise software, procurement, supply chain, business networks. Those were the areas of focus. And prior to SAP, where I spent a couple of years, I was with this company called Ariba. And Ariba was a pioneer in procurement software in the cloud. And I spent 13 years at Ariba, initially joined as an engineer, and then eventually ran everything from product engineering and operations. And Ariba was acquired by SAP it's about 10 years now, 10 years ago. And that's how I ended up at SAP. And after SAP was my journey with Legion.
Wow. So this, I guess, leads me into my next question, which is what you attribute to,
Mhm.
from your career journey specifically to have gotten you to where you are today to starting Legion. Like what was the catalyst for you?
I think there were many, but firstly, I'll say that just spending over 15 years building complex enterprise software was a lot of grounding in the type of software that workforce management is. Workforce management is complex, is mission critical. Um, lot of large companies are depending on this software, so the type of experience and grounding that you need building complex enterprise software, I had that before. The part that was about the subject matter itself, I think there's several things that sort of kind of triggered in a very short time period for me. One was I had left SAP at that time, and I was enjoying a nice long break of 6 months, which kind of now seems like such a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I was, traveling within the U.S., visiting national parks, and seeing a lot of small towns across the country, and it struck me how large or small businesses across the country that I'm experiencing, whether it's a hotel I'm staying in or a small cafe that I'm visiting, or it could be a store inside a national park for souvenirs. Everybody had like looking for worker sign,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Help
like,
wanted.
wow, this is like it's a problem that permeates no matter what the size of the company is. What is the what's the matter here? And since I had a lot of time talking to spending a lot of time talking to the workers, talking to the managers, and I started sort of it started putting together a picture for me where it were very similar problems. The employees, the hourly workers, were looking for things which we would consider pretty basic, like basic. Hey, can I have a little bit more control over my schedule?
Mm-hmm.
Can I have better tools to communicate with my manager if I'm running late? Can I get paid after the shift is done? Like those types of things, and managers were saying, "Hey, I too need better tools. It would be great if I could have some technology or something to help me, a manage my team better, make sure they're happy, but also they have a big job. They're managing customers and managing budgets and making sure they're compliant, and so that same, in some shape or form, using maybe different words, the same story was echoed over and over again. I might have heard that on that trip of almost 2 months. I might have heard that, I don't know, 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back and I talked to people in my network from SAP and retail execs, and and they had their own perspective of this, but very similar type of kind of conclusions, where situations going from bad to worse, where new things like omni-channel, where customers are coming at you using, not just walking in the store but buying online and
Right.
expect same day delivery, was the most efficient way to deploy labor and still run as a business and still give positive experiences to your employees. That was just a very hard problem, and I felt like after hearing all that, I was really compelled to that it's not just a great business opportunity. Obviously, it is every time you have an opportunity to solve a problem at this scale. But it also is a problem that has a lot of social ramifications, and it could this is one of those things that could genuinely improve lives, that could genuinely improve the society and the economic value of the society, and that was very compelling for me. So that's led to sort of the initially the more research into what could be solutions versus just looking at the problems that needed to be solved, but eventually led to the founding of Legion.
That's an amazing story. And I think there's probably no better guest to ask this of. But can you tell us what the mission of Legion is so that we can jump right into those survey questions?
Yeah, it is. The mission of Legion is easy to say, and but it will be a lifelong,
Mm-hmm.
exercise in trying to deliver to it, which is turning hourly jobs into good jobs. That's our mission. And the first reaction I get when I hear that is, "Oh, that's great. That sounds like the right thing to work on." But what exactly does it mean? And my answer to that is, when you look at both the employees who occupy these jobs in labor intensive industries, particularly like retail, hospitality, manufacturing, distribution centers, and call centers, so on and so forth, and the employers who employ these workers, they both would agree that there is a lot of opportunity to improve the the efficiency and the quality of these jobs. Businesses, obviously, for these labor intensive businesses, this is probably the largest manageable spend on their P&L.
Mm.
And it makes sense. You're paying everybody by the hour. You want to make sure that what you're getting, something back for it, which because that directly drives your bottom line and your top line in many industries. So efficiency and productivity just top of your list of things to worry about. But then the turnover is so high, the cost of worker replacement, in many of these industries, turnover is over 100%, which
Mm-hmm.
may seem, for people not from that industry, may seem like a mind-boggling number, but that's normal,
Right.
or at least considered normal. Which we just have to reject that concept. Something is wrong.
Yeah.
It should not be normal. And from an employee standpoint, speaking of turnover, from an employee standpoint, they understand wages cannot be very high because these are jobs where they are closer to the minimum wage rate jobs, right? They understand that. They still would like as much wages as they can get. Don't get me wrong, but wages tend to normalize or standardize across job categories. For example, restaurant workers in San Francisco will end up making more or less the same. There
Right.
isn't one restaurant that's going to stand out and say, I'm going to pay $20 more. Almost never happens. So whether they stay at a job or leave a job comes down to other things than just pay rate. And that's where employees, rightfully so, are asking for, in my opinion, basic experiences like, some say in owning their schedule, some communication tools, and so on and so forth. So when you provide these things, when you provide this flexibility and better experience, maybe digital experience to the employees, and productivity efficiency for the employers, that those jobs are good jobs. That you will
Mm-hmm.
transform these jobs into good jobs. Definitely much better than where they are today. Then on top of that, when you layer on objectives of financial wellness, of better engagement, of workforce sharing between multiple locations for employees that increase productivity and yield. When you kind of layer all these things, this definitely looks like a roadmap on how to improve hourly jobs across these industries, and that's basically our mission.
That's amazing. And it's actually a perfect segue because there are some really interesting data points that I want to cover here. And so, to give everyone a little bit of background, Propeller conducted a study in April 2022, so very recently, commissioned by Legion, and surveyed 1,016 hourly workers and 505 managers in North America. Legion released the report on this survey on June 14th, called 2022 State of the Hourly Workforce. Hence why we're discussing this today. And one of the key findings was that the Great Resignation is slowing in 2022, with only 8.7% of respondents saying they're currently looking for a new role. However, 75% of Gen Z employees responded saying they're likely to look for a job in the next 12 months. The survey also found that there is deep dissatisfaction within the hourly employee population, pointing to all of these things that you have already kind of shared with us. But specifically, what are your thoughts on these findings, and how can businesses work to improve employee satisfaction for their hourly workforce?
Yeah, I think the findings are not very surprising,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because this has been the trend for, at least ever since we've been doing studies like this, which is ever since Legion was founded. And I know there's more material on the internet done by other companies and other research firms, which all point to similar things as we are talking about, which is there is a, businesses can do something about this. And I'm going to get to your second question first and then come back to the study.
Sure.
I think the biggest thing businesses need to know is when you have an objective of managing labor budgets tightly, which you should. I mean, you look at the macro, you look at concerns around inflation, consumer spending.
Mm-hmm.
That makes perfect sense that you should be managing this tightly. But the key insight is this is not a zero sum game. You don't have to the objective of managing labor tightly doesn't have to compete with the objective of improving your employee experiences. They can both coexist. Not only they can coexist, they should coexist, because actually when you treat your employees well and give them some of the things that they're looking for, it actually lowers your labor cost because you're going to retain them higher. The cost of worker replacement is going to be lower. Just very tangible, hard dollar savings.
Mm.
There's also all the intangibles and other outcomes like happy customers treat your employee. Happy employees treat your customers better, and really make an impact to the top line. So all that, so that's the conclusion, the real conclusion, that it's not a zero sum game. You can and should work on both simultaneously. Now, coming back to the study shows the type of things that employees are looking for. It is like a cheat sheet. This is what you got to
Mm-hmm.
do, and you got to figure out a way in when, as a business, in your scheduling standard operating procedures, do you have a way to incorporate employees' preferences?
Mm.
If not, that's a problem. However, you do it. Of course, we think it's a problem best solved by software, okay? Because it's just a number of permutations. And if you got a roster of 25 people, suddenly, and if everybody has a request or two every 3 weeks, now you're looking at a lot of, permutations on how
Right.
to try and satisfy every single one of your employees while still having a workable schedule that's compliant and within budget. Now, suddenly, the complexity adds up. But but however you do it, maybe your roster size is small. Maybe it's easy for you to do this in Excel. However you do it, the idea of incorporating employees' flexibility in your scheduling practice is paramount. That's roughly speaking 60% of the reason why employees are leaving, and that is massive. Just that insight alone is massive, and doing something about it is just paramount. Then creating better ways for employees to communicate with the manager. These jobs are very stressful jobs, and
Mm.
and many people don't realize there are businesses out there with the three strike rules. If you're late 3 times, you get a ding, and
Mm.
it may show up on your performance. You may get fired. But
Yeah.
conversely, there's no tools for communication. Um, Most of these employees don't even get a company email address to look up policies, to look up training material, and so that's sort of the world in which these employees live in day out. And to provide some communication tools, whether it's chat, messaging, newsfeed,
Mm.
that talks about policies and things like at a minimum. But then you can level up from there, and you can say, hey, how about kudos and and encouragement, and increasing morals and highlighting your employee of the week, and all these things matter a lot. And we've seen
Mm.
another 40% of employees who really care about these things. Then, of course, there is instant pay, which is, again, it's been growing. It's a trend that wasn't, it was probably a blip on the radar a few years ago. Now it's like, it is from our vantage point here at Legion, it's starting to become a basic perk
Mm-hmm.
that we believe some industries will just adopt, and your ability to hire and retain workforce is, this is just going to be something you have to do. So that's the my take on this, that the message, the study, the result from the study is not surprising. In fact, that's great. It's consistent year over year. We are seeing similar things that the employees are asking for and the managers are asking for. And it really provides a cheat sheet on what to do to really have a more efficient labor operations, a highly retained staff, and a better business.
Right. And actually, something that we have, and I've talked about instant pay a lot on this podcast and in other places, because I think that's exactly right, that it's a basic perk. And, if businesses are not seeing some of these things that might have been progressive 2 years ago as a basic perk today, then they're going to be behind the eight ball every time. So, I think what's really cool about this survey is that, to your point, as you mentioned before, it is like a cheat sheet. Employers are often asking, well, what do we do? How do we solve this problem? And this survey is like, well, here are some of the things that you can
That's
do
right.
to focus on solving the problem. And actually, one of the things that came up is that, or that the survey showed, is that other than pay, scheduling, flexibility, and control are the top issues that would motivate an employee to take a new job. How would Legion Solutions, which you've sort of highlighted so far, in how would they influence hourly employees' experience at work, and what statistics from the survey can you share with us to help us better understand this result?
Yes. So what Legion fundamentally does is it's automates, using software and using advanced software, I must add, like machine learning and AI. We automate workforce management operations with the objective of improving efficiency and productivity for the business and improving experience for the employees. Right. That's sort of how we state the purpose of our software. Now, it all starts with, if you think about scheduling as a problem statement, it all starts with just knowing when to schedule your employees and what kind of employees, with what skills do you need at what time. When you peel the layers of that onion, you know you need a demand forecast on where and how much demand you have for labor. Whether you are retail, it could be customers walking in, or customers buying online and coming for pickup to the store, or if you're a restaurant or a QSR, quick serve restaurant, but how many customers are coming in, or delivery orders. You need a really, really good and accurate sense of when the demand is for what type of outcomes, whether it's sales, whether it's producing food, whether it's whatever it might be.
Right.
Um, so Legion starts with doing a really good job of an automated demand forecast across all your omni channels, right? However you serve your customers, we'll forecast that demand. Then furthermore, we'll figure out, to meet that demand optimally, how much labor do you need by both the volume and the skill, and we optimize that. We that process removes any waste. Meaning, if there is an employee that is being scheduled for 5 hours, another employee can do task A and task B. We optimize across both so that you're maximizing that employee's time in your workplace. So that's optimized labor.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have something that has been generated that very clearly and efficiently defines how much work needs to be done across 15 minutes interval across the next several weeks. Now that forms the foundation of generating a schedule. And the next step in this process, again, using AI optimization based, we figure out now, okay, if you have a roster of 25 people, Sally wants to work on Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Joe wants to work on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Joe likes 4-hour shifts out because he lives close to the work location, while Sally lives far away, so she likes 8-hour shifts or 6-hour shifts because what's her commute time. And Mark likes to work in 2 different other locations, weekends on that location and weekdays on this location. There are lots and lots of possibilities to process. Furthermore, each one of these employees may have some policies that they're tied to, like Sally and Mark could be part-time employees, and Joe could be a full-time employee. So maximize Joe for 40 hours. And so all of these things get crunched, and out comes a schedule of who works when, where, and how much based on their preferences, their skills, but also most important, the needs of the business. And then if there are some shifts for which we don't find a good match, then we send offers, which offers are like, think about like a Uber offer where, you get something in on your mobile app that says, hey, there is a shift with that's gonna the estimated pay on this shift is so and so on Friday at 2 p.m. Do you want it? And we send it to targeted people who have the skills, who are not working at that time, compliance, so on and so forth. And we drive further engagement with the schedule. Employees get the schedule, they come to work, they clock in on Legion because now Legion knows the schedule. They know when the employee is supposed to be there at what time and leave at what time. We can generate a timesheet automatically and very efficiently by automatically approving most of the clocks and letting managers only deal with exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
And that results in a pay file that gets sent to payroll to pay. In that experience after working, we also enable employees to draw some portion of the pay instantly. So if I've just completed my shift, you open Legion app and you'll say, hey, you just completed a shift. That's great. You can drop to 50% right now if you want to. So when you think about this end-to-end experience, we covered so much ground here in terms of automation. First and foremost, like these are things that just better handled by software. Like you think about demand forecasting and permutations and combinations of who gets to work when and how much based on all these factors we talked about, optimizing labor to be under budget and compliant, automatically collecting all the time clocks and matching them against the schedule, enabling an experience to the employees of getting drawing some of their wages instantly, and managing payroll. Like that whole thing is something these businesses do day in, day out, week after week. And for them to have such an amazing automated process that takes care of all these things and is actually a better process than what you would execute manually, no matter how hard you try, is what Legion platform is all about. And that's and then when we execute this, everything with Legion is measurable. So we can measure savings, we can measure schedule efficiency, we can measure employee retention gain, we can measure employee engagement, we can measure activity, like all of that stuff, because it's a platform that's data driven. We have all these outcomes that we can share. So businesses have insights that they never had before in this. Like, if you've got 1,000 locations, you're not having these types of insights, on every single location. So that's basically the platform, right? In terms of your, the results, when we look at, like the survey results, each one of these, it gives us, like we talked about earlier in this conversation, it's a cheat sheet. It gives us a playbook on how to optimize our software too, right? We say, okay, well, employees are looking for better communication tools. Great. Communication tools can be built. There are lots of standalone communication tools out there, but employees are engaged with their schedule.
Right.
Legion's weekly engagement is 88%, which is crazy high for a business app. When employees engage with the schedule, it's a great time to show them messages and communications from their employer. That's in the same app, and it leverages all the engagement. Great. Employers are worried about employees accessing some communication tools outside of clock hours for compliance reasons, rightfully so. Well, but Legion is aware of the schedule, is aware of employees' engagement, can request consent and deliver that outcome while taking care of all these other things, right? So when you think about piecing together all these things that are, for us very much driven by the outcome of the survey, right? We saying this is what employees are looking for. Here's how we optimize our software to deliver that results. So from an employer standpoint, or from our customer standpoint, make it easy. You can take a look at the cheat sheet and do all those things, or you can use Legion because we already incorporated all those things.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the world is at our fingertips today, so why wouldn't we just incorporate everything in one stop shop, right? And you mentioned it, a bit, and we talked about it just before too. This idea of earned wage access, or as we
Yes.
call it, instant pay, which is essentially enabling employees and people to earn their wages in an accessible way after they've earned their, worked their hours and so on and so
Yeah.
forth, very generally speaking. And this has come up a bit in recent years, as we sort of alluded to a little bit earlier. How would you describe earned wage access to someone who maybe has not heard about it? I know, again, we've talked about it a little bit already. And then what did the survey share with us about what employees want and what earned wage access means to them?
Earned wage access is something that has grown in priority, I think, both for employees and hence for employers. Um, the reason why it's grown in priority is not hard to understand, I think, because a lot of employees, inflation has overtaken the wage rate increase for these jobs. I mean, if you think about just the graph of the increase of just cost of living, right?
Right.
That's far exceeded the graph of minimum wage rate increase over the past 50 years. And so now many of these employees, unfortunately, are in a paycheck to paycheck living mode, and they have to do multiple jobs to just
Mm.
kind of have a decent living wage. Um, when you are in that mode, it is very hard to react to unexpected situations. For example, if your car breaks down, or if your kid needs, your
Mm-hmm.
kid is sick and needs, extra care. Um, there's a whole industry, in my opinion, very bad industry of payday loans, which was exploiting this situation,
Mm-hmm.
okay, by charging exorbitant rates to just do some cash advances. And then, when the pay comes along, you gotta pay that back and or incur even more interest and things like that. Earned wage access is, if when done right, is a great benefit to employees because it gives them access to the wages that they already earned. So if I did a shift today, this morning, technically I've earned those wages. Why should I wait for a week or week and a half or 2 weeks to get my paycheck? I, if my employer is willing to give that to me right now, or at least a portion of that, leaving the rest for taxes and garnishments and all that stuff later, but at least a portion of that, that solves some of my quote unquote emergency cash flow problems. And
Right.
so it's not surprising to see why this is such a great benefit, and it doesn't come at any real cost. I mean, in fact, it will help with retention. It will actually give your business back money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it gives employees a benefit. And of course, and I qualify this by if done right. And if done right
Right.
means you have to really think about this as a program. You got to think about this as, you know, the benefits. Are you compliant? Are you using a solution that can prove that it's wages earned but not paid? Otherwise, it would be construed as similar to a payday loan. There's all these legalities around this that have to be carefully navigated. But there are businesses out there. I mean, solution providers out there who have done that, and our point of view at Legion is this is best incorporated as a feature in workforce management, because workforce management is all the data to
Mm-hmm.
prove that you worked. Workforce management, the data to inject any workflow in your payroll cycle that says, okay, you already took $40 off, and now what's left is 60. So you don't need extra integrations. You can really have a very tight operational program around this that doesn't incur any risk for you as a business, but still deliver this capability to via an app which has, like Legion, which has 88% engagement, right? Now that's sort of how it works. We think it's definitely something that every survey we've done, this is increasing on the list of employee needs, and we believe we are not that far away from a point where this just becomes table stakes, like
Mm-hmm.
just like a digital schedule is already table stakes. I mean, how many of your Gen Z employees going to work for places where you have to where they give you a paper scale that take a photo of, right?
Right.
That this is very much on its way to becoming table stakes, that if I work, I should get paid at the end of the day. And keep in mind the competition is gig economy companies who already provide this. If I'm a brick and mortar retailer with 1,000 stores, I'm competing not with another brick and mortar retailer necessarily for labor. I'm competing with Ubers, Instacarts, Postmates,
Yes.
DoorDash. That's who I'm competing with, and they already do this. So from an
Right.
employee standpoint, hey, I could do DoorDash and I could get this benefit.
Right. Absolutely. This is all pointing toward the movement toward a potentially more gig like economy, which
Absolutely.
is something we could spend another 40 minutes talking about. So we'll table that for now. We've spoken a lot about the hourly workforce, and while focusing on the hourly workforce is behind everything that we do at Legion, of course, it is also just as important to think about the individuals who are managing those employees. So the survey did share that managers want more flexibility and control as well. So can you expand a little bit on this?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up because when we talk about hourly workforce, I think it's easy to conclude we don't mean the managers. Actually, we mean the managers too. Managers are inclusive in the
Mm,
people whose experiences need to be elevated.
right.
Um, Manager turnover is very high in a lot of these industries.
Yeah.
It is just a shade lower than frontline employee turnovers, and and that's, I mean, you can imagine the impact of that on businesses. Your
Yeah.
managers are essentially, kind of the general manager of these stores or these, units or locations and whatnot. And when you're having turnover in your manager ranks, you're training people, and and you're losing all that knowledge, every time a
Yeah.
manager walks out of the door. So, and they're a very hard job. They
Right.
are, I think, in this personas of workforce management that, you know, uh, when workforce management touches a lot of personas, payroll and employees, manage is one of the hardest jobs, in my opinion,
Yes.
because they are dealing with, competing priorities. I want to have my schedule. I want to manage my labor within budget. I want to make sure I don't pay any compliance penalties and things like that. I want to manage my location turnover. I want to keep my employees happy. I want to keep my customers happy. Like, this is a
Yeah.
con every day, right? Um, and when they don't have good tools, when they don't see investment being made in improving their ability to manage, um, yes, that is going to result in turnover. And I don't think, like, just like any one of us, any or at least most individuals want to do a good job, working and delivering to their responsibilities. So managers want more flexibility. Managers want better tools to help manage their employees' needs for flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in context of their labor budget and other challenges. And managers want recognition or tools for recognizing their teams, but also recognition themselves. This is, definitely something that we are seeing. But the key is, to some folks, maybe it was surprising to see the need, how much of flexibility need from managers showed up in the survey.
Mm,
And I think, but I think it makes sense because it is a very stressful job, and for managers to have some degree of control over their own schedules too, um, as well as, um, having tools to better, create an employee schedules. I think makes a lot of sense.
yeah, I agree. I think managers are often overlooked in some ways when it comes to solutions that are geared toward making lives better and improving the experiences of employees, because it's usually targeting that end user. And most of the time the end user is that sales employee or back of house employee. And I think it's
Exactly.
great that there's a focus here in the survey as well in understanding what managers need, because while they are part of this hourly workforce that we talk about so often, they're also the ones managing the hourly
Mhm.
workforce. And to your point with the competing priorities, I'm sure that anyone listening can really resonate, or that this will resonate with them. That the manager is not only managing the schedule they're also, some of the competing priorities are things that you can't predict, and that can make it extremely challenging. And so flexibility for managers is it's not a surprise for me, and I'm sure any retailer that will listen to this episode will agree. And I think managers, when they hear something like this, will probably feel very heard, and that's so much a part of what needs to be part of the conversation, I guess we can say. So with that, I'd love to ask you what some actions employers can take today are to address these employee concerns and therefore improve the experience of their employees.
I mean, first thing I would say is, measure these things. One of my favorite questions to ask customers and prospects is, what's your match rate of, what's match rate? Match rate is how much do you incorporate your employees' preferences and match them with your schedule? I know the answer, but I intentionally ask a question. I've never really seen people measure this, even though it's the biggest driver of attrition or retention. How is your engagement with your frontline workers? Do you have a NPS score? How efficient are you in managing your schedules and tying them to the needs of your customers? And just using data. I mean, in this day and age, there is no reason any of these things should not be measurable on a day-to-day basis, not just like a big massive project, but on an ongoing basis. Anytime you have a near real-time insight into how these things are doing. So that's very important, because the best-in-class businesses are doing that today. And if you're not doing that, you should really plot the trajectory of your business and whether you are going to stay best in class or get to best in class. And then, like we said, use this example of the survey. Use these insights to drive some operational actions. Those operational actions, we think, for any reasonably complex business you should have software like Legion to drive those actions, so that you're not, you can consistently guarantee measurable results, right? But however you do it, it's very important that you do it, because these things, workers and managers are consistently saying, like, the data is so strong on this, there's no ambiguity. They're consistently saying these are the things that they want, and these are the things that will drive measurable results and move the needle. So however you do it, these things should be, given how tight the labor market is and where the macro is going, this should really be on top of the list for labor intensive businesses.
Right. Absolutely. And I really appreciate you going into the survey and enlightening us with so many of these data points. I think to your point, which you mentioned at the very beginning, is that these survey results, to me at least, are not very surprising. And I think that part of that is that we have, as employers, we have a lot of work to do. And luckily, we have surveys like this one that have been commissioned by Legion to help us solve the problems without, involving any guesswork. It's all here. And we know that while it was 1,000 plus hourly workers and 500 plus managers that were polled in North America, we know that this is a really strong representation of this bigger challenge that we've all been confronted with, probably since the dawn of time, but especially in recent times.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know that when I was working in retail as an hourly employee, that this was any different. I think it's all kind of the same stuff, but now we have data and we have software and solutions like Legion, for example, that make these problems go away and help to alleviate some of the challenges. So with that, I have one more question for you, because this is something that I ask of every single guest on the podcast. But before I get into that, I just want to thank you again for your time and for sharing all of this wonderful information. So the very last question that I have for you is, what is the best advice that you have ever received that you continue to live by? And this can be work-related, this can be non-work related, whatever kind of resonates with you.
I'll share a work-related thing which was very profoundly impactful on my life when somebody told me, work on things that matter. not things that are important. There's difference, or not things that are going to be, the best way to make money, or not the things that are going to make you look better in the society. All those things may or may not happen, but it's not something that you are focused on. You're focused on working on things that matter. And matter is a personal decision. You decide what matters and what doesn't matter. But the idea of that is, if you're convinced that you're working on something that really matters to you, your quality of work, your motivation, your getting out of bed every day, is all that stuff becomes a little bit easier, and at the end of the day, you feel you've made a little bit more progress towards whatever that objective is. So work on stuff that matters.
I love it. Those are some really good words to live by. And I guess with that, I'd love to ask you if you'd like to share where any listeners can connect with you if they'd like to learn more.
Yeah, Legion website is legion.co, and that's a great way to learn more about Legion. But also on LinkedIn would be, if anyone has advice or feedback, or want to share notes, I'm definitely very active on LinkedIn. So please, look me up on LinkedIn and drop me a note.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sanish. We really appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Tracy. This was great.